Once the suspension was glued onto the model, I decided to glue the top track onto the model, before the top of the hull would be attached onto the model. After drying, the top of the track and the hull side were primed in Vallejo black primer. As highly detailed as this model kit is, for some reason the front light guards are missing from this kit. So I ended up scratch building the missing parts out of both 0.5mm brass rod plus 0.5mm styrene rod. And with the assembly of the hull completed, it was time to assemble the turret. To add a bit of visual contrast to the paintwork, I added some shadows and highlights to the model. The shadows were painted in a dark olive drab paint mix made from a mixture of black and olive drab, applied into the recessed areas on the hull, using a mixture of a small roundhead paintbrush and small flathead paintbrushes. After drying, the highlights were applied onto the model by painting an olive drab and yellow paint mix, also using a small roundhead and flathead paintbrush. The highlights were applied to the top of the hull and other raised surfaces. Then, the spare track links on the hull front were painted in Citadel lead voucher, and the front stowage board was painted in Vallejo flat brown. The tracks and underside of the hull were first coated in Vallejo Weathering FX mud and grass, using an old paintbrush to apply the mixture. After drying, a coat of Tamiya soil texture paint was applied in the same way onto the model, with the excess being removed with a cotton bud. The track links were weathered in the same way, while the parts were still on the sprue frames. Then a layer of Tamiya buff was dry brushed over the track and lower hull. After drying, the front stowage that came with this kit was glued onto the model, followed by gluing the lower part of the tracks with Reval cement. Once the tracks were dried, the turret was attached onto the model, and with the build completed, it was time to create a small diorama for the model to be displayed on. The paint scheme of this Firefly depicts a tank used during the 1944 Normandy landings, so it makes sense for the diorama to depict a slice of the Norman landscape. After looking at archive photos of Sword Beach, I noticed a narrow gauge railway in numerous photos located in the British landing zone, with the tracks covered in what appears to be beach sand, and several wooden chain link fences in the background of various archive photos. Using the images as a historical reference for the diorama, I first cut a piece of HO/00 gauge rail track, with one side of the tracks being removed using a hobby knife. Then the sleepers were cut to a width of 1 centimeter. Then the track was reassembled onto a piece of balsa wood with a multi-bond glue. Then the tracks were glued onto the diorama using a hot glue gun, followed by the sculpting of the terrain using air drying clay covering the diorama minus the rail track. The dirt road also had the tank tracks impression sculpted into the ground using the spare one-piece tracks and pressing the part into the wet clay. After drying, the diorama was painted. Part of the track was covered in beach sand, using matte Mod Podge glue to attach the sand to the base. Then, a mixture of gravel and sand was applied onto the base in the same way. Then, the gravel and sand was coated in isopropyl alcohol, followed by a dishwashing liquid plus Mod Podge matte glue mix, sealing the sand and gravel onto the base. Then, after drying, a mixture of static grass was glued onto the base, followed by the making of a small chain link fence, by first making the fence post out of strip wood and brass rods. After drying, the part was painted in flat white, then tulle fabric was glued onto the part, and after the part was glued onto the base, both the model and diorama was completed. Thank you for watching, and good luck with all your ongoing scale modeling projects. Here it is, the completed model and diorama.